Hello and welcome to part 2 of the vlog series where we're visiting Dumfries and Galloway on a photography trip. If you managed to see part 1, you'll know that most of that was about the planning aspects, and there weren't that many images because the weather was terrible. Luckily, coming up for you, plenty of images where we've visited Port Patrick and Dunskey Castle. As with lots of harbours like this, often detail shots are where you're gonna get the most interesting results. As well as videoing the little walk around the harbour, I was using two cameras, my big full-frame Nikon D810 along with my Panasonic Lumix, my small 4/3 mirrorless camera. The combination of that enables me to just grab shots, so nothing done on a tripod here, really just wandering around and catching images as they come into view. Next was a short walk, between 10 and 15 minutes, to visit Dunskey Castle along a quite dramatic coastal path, which is just south of Port Patrick. The castle is a ruins, and there is a gate preventing access through the main portal. When I visited, there was a path off to the left of the castle, and a fence, as you can see, was collapsed. I've had a little wander in, but there are some big drops, so not something I'm going to recommend, but I did pop in on this particular visit, as did some other visitors who were there. This morning we are at Port Patrick and had a short 10-minute walk, short and steep walk, to visit this castle here, which is called Dunskey Castle. A couple of things I'm going to do is a long exposure shot. We've got some nice cloud and sea movement. The light's a little bit harsh for something more conventional. Nice for postcards, but not particularly dramatic, so I'm thinking long exposure shot. Okay, I'm shooting with a 24mm lens at the moment, which is unusual for me. I normally shoot 50mm and above, but if I go back any further I'm off a cliff, so that's not practical in this instance. I'm currently doing a exposure of about 2 minutes. I did have some really good cloud in the sky, but it started to clear a little bit, so in order to get some sufficient cloud in that, it's going to need quite a long exposure. So I've set the lens to f/22, not ideal diffraction, but required. We're in bulb mode, ISO 64, which is the kind of base ISO that I like to use this camera on, and I've got a polarizer on there, which is going to add a little bit of punch to the sky and the clouds, hopefully, as well as holding back around 2 stops of light. And then I've got a 10-stop neutral density filter on, so I'm holding back about 12 stops of light, and that gives me enough exposure for 2 minutes, so we will see how that goes.
with the very long exposure stuff, there's always a bit of trial and error. For me personally, I can never quite picture how it's going to look, so always a bit of trial and error. Usually the exposures aren't too bad. If anything, they come out underexposed, but take a shot and see what happens. Okay, I think my 2 minutes is up.
The light wasn't great when I visited, so I didn't want to do something conventional. So I actually ended up doing an exposure of about 3 minutes, and it's produced a very surreal looking shot that almost looks like a composite, but I can reassure you it's one raw file, edited in Raw Editor and then Silver Efex Pro. I'm also probably going to crack out the Holga and do a black and white shot. Holgers are particularly good when you've got some very strong shapes and lines, such as a big old castle. Not good if you need detail, so this suits it, and I think the black and white will suit it as well. I quite like to mix up my photography using both digital and film. In this instance I had a couple of film cameras, but probably my favourite film camera is the Holga, which is a toy camera, costs about £30 and takes medium format film. It's got a very cheap lens in there, nothing fancy, but can produce some really, I think, striking images that have an aged look, a very kind of primitive photography look, and that can work quite well with some subjects. So it's nice to mix it up sometimes, getting a very detailed shot with a digital, but then getting something slightly more impressionistic with the film camera. So despite really just being a recce visit on a not particularly good lighting day for photography, I enjoyed my trip to Port Patrick and Dunskey Castle. Definitely locations I think I'll visit again. Anyway, coming up in the next video is the journey down to the most southerly part of Scotland, which is the Mull of Galloway. Again, an interesting coastline area, and a lovely lighthouse and a great spot to spend some time. So if you are watching the next instalment of the vlog, then that's what you'll see. Trip to the Mull of Galloway and both daytime and evening shots in that vlog. I hope you can join us then.